My Very Last Life, Chapter 19. A Frenzy of Exultations. That's the title. It's the title of a painting, of a famous painting. And I've had this painting, well, I've had it in my mind ever since discovering it. Must have been in college. But I had it since doing when was this, 2007? Doing a literature stipendium in Krakow for 3 months, 3 paid months of sitting around in Krakow drinking with other writers in a big house. I mean, it was a lot. There was a lot of drinking and writing. And I didn't write anything that ever got finished. Actually, in that way, it was a waste of time. But it was a great, wonderful 3 months. And I remember at 5 o'clock in the morning, or maybe it was only 2. Before going to bed, the final night before leaving, I put. I don't know if I had an iPod then or something. I don't know if it was an iPhone or iPod or something. But I put Bob Dylan's album. What was that? Modern Times on, and went down into the park next door in the dark and at 3 a.m. and danced for 45 minutes to the entire album. It was like a crazy person in the night. It was a beautiful time. Anyway, so that was Krakow. But when I was there, this painting, Frenzy of Exultations, is hanging in a museum somewhere, and so it's one of the famous old masters of Krakow. And so there's a lot of, where the tourists can buy it in various little forms, on mugs and coffee mugs and probably on T-shirts and things like this. And there was a print of it, a nice little print of it on a little piece of wood, a little block of wood. The guy just printed it on this little block of wood, smaller than my hand, about the size of my hand, a little bit smaller. And I said I could have this, and so I bought it for a few euros, and took it home, and I've had it like since then, leaning on a bookshelf against a book, or against against a whiskey bottle, or against something something close by where I can see it often. And it's one of these paintings that just go through you. You can't stop looking at it and thinking of it and even dreaming of it. A Frenzy of Exultations. I thought for a long time, and then I did, and okay. So the whole story. Let's go back to my friend Klaus, who died, not too long ago, and his last text message to me was a feast of irony and fate, because he thought this whole worry about corona was nonsense, of course, and it's just a virus. It's like a common cold that no one knows what they're talking about. They're all idiots, and of course people who deny the danger are the first to be taken by it, I guess. So he went, and it took him, and he's gone. So okay, I've talked about that before, of course. And his wife, or his ex-wife, his widow, or his ex-wife, I guess she's the ex-wife, she came to clean out the apartment, and she offered me the picture, the print that was hanging over his desk, over his computer, where he wrote every day. He was a writer, of course. And so I went down. This was several weeks ago, maybe a month ago, more than a month ago. It was February. And I went down and picked it up, and it's a cheap print, and it's in a cheap frame. And so it's, and Klaus was a cheap guy, basically. And but it's Goya's etching, or aqua tint, I guess it's called, of the sleep of reason. The sleep of reason gives birth to monsters, and it's a writer or some guy asleep at his desk, and the monsters in his dreams are coming out of him and flying around, and like shadows coming out of his breast, out of his back, out of his mind, and swirling about there. And so yesterday I took it out, and I wondered what to do with it. I have to hang it up here somewhere. I want to see it when I write. And then my eyes fell upon this little thing, this little block of wood that I've been keeping with me for so long. The Frenzy of Exultations. And it's a similar kind of thing. And it struck me how similar we were in many ways, as writers also, but the things that appealed to us, that inspired us, places where our minds went. He wasn't, like, for example, he wasn't into fantasy or science fiction, as I was. Not at all into fantasy, just a little science fiction. So he was different from me in a lot of ways. But he chose this picture, Goya, The Sleep of Reason Gives Birth to Monsters, for the picture to be looking at every day when he writes. And of course, you can say that it's a picture about reason, and the age of reason, and this great European tradition of reason and enlightenment, which is really bullshit. Europeans go on and on about that all the time, whenever they can, the age of reason and the age of enlightenment and all this, and these great, European intellectual, achievements, but in the end, the only big thing that came up was a Holocaust in the end. So I don't take Europeans talking about their own intellectual achievements. It's bullshit. But there's something visceral and soulful about this painting. It's a man asleep and his monsters are coming out. He sleeps, and there they are, the monsters. And they're allowed to come out, to sneak out into the reality, into the day, into his mind. They have him for himself now, until he wakes up again. There they are. There's something beautiful and truthful about it. And then I looked at my little thing, and there's no now on this Goya's print, there's the words. He's written the words on the side of the desk. The sleep of monsters brings forth the sleep of reason brings forth monsters. He's written it, so it's the statement is clear. This is about irrationality and the superstitions of his times, and the stupidity and not thinking things through, and going through irrationality to find reason. So it's a clear satire on his time, and so there's that intellectual element, the of the writing on the wall. So he interpreted the story, the picture. He interpreted for the reader. Sorry, he interpreted the painting for the viewer, but the Frenzy of Exultations does not do that. It's only the painting. And it's a painting. It's in color. The aqua tint is, black and white, or I guess sepia and white. And but the Frenzy of Exultations is in color. It's a black horse coming out of the darkness, or maybe the horse is the darkness. And on one side of the painting, you see the front of the horse's slathered mouth, and he's like crazy. It's like he's even a little bit distorted. The horse itself is distorted. It's going so crazy and so wild and so frenzied as he's galloping out of the night, out of the darkness, or he's taking the darkness with him, because he is the darkness. He is the forefront of the darkness, and it's his black body as it merges with the dark. It is the darkness. It's not two separate things. And on the back of this horse is a naked woman, of course, a beautiful naked woman, and her red hair. I happen to like red-haired women, The red hair is flying and flowing, and it's like a whirlwind around her, and she's holding on to the neck of this horse, and she's completely naked riding this horse, and she's going with the horse, and there's something weirdly mystical. It's like she's a succubus or a witch or something, or some crazy mystical, unearthly being who has managed to harness the darkness of our souls, the mystery of the night, life and death, and everything that is erupting and chaotic and unfathomable and unreignable, ungovernable, unleashable. She's got it. She's holding on to it for her dear life, of course, and riding with it. And I just love that. They're both a part of some weird place in us that just denies the reality. The reality that you can number and measure with science and with mechanics and with rationalization and everything that Goya is talking about. The rationality is just it's just the alternative of that. It's the difference of that. It's the opposite of that. It's the deep depth in our souls. It's the amygdala. It's this primitive part deep inside us that we cannot reach, and I suppose we don't want to. We shouldn't reach it. That's got to be a hard place to be. If we were all that thing, if we didn't have this layer of prefrontal cortex and all that, on top of the amygdala, the primitive brain, this dark cave deep inside us, it would be probably horrible. But this guy, this is his most famous painting. He died when he was young, like 26 or something. Poor bastard. He found it. He reached down in himself and he found it. He found this dark place, and he portrays it. He says so much about it. It's this woman on her wild riding, holding on for dear life to our darkest demons. And you go back. I go back and I look at all the things of the imagination that have inspired me and that I loved. And I see in my life a long history of myth and story and kind of dark, wondrous imagination, but not just imagination. It's imagination that tries to dig down into the bottom, to the core, to the heart of our souls. And it was always there in a million different forms. Well, maybe not a million, but thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of forms. It was all there, and I'm surrounded by it. It has defined my life. It was there when I was born, and it was there when I was growing up. And a lot of times I didn't know it. I denied it. I thought, well, this is just, when you read a book, you read a comic book. You see a movie, you see The Walking Dead. It's entertainment. It's not more than that. And so you shirk it off and you think, well, the important thing is life, right? So we're thinking about life, or we're dealing with life and the reality, and we're trying to, conquer reality, because that's where we live, right? We live in reality, so we have to do our best to conquer it and to kind of somehow become, master of our realities. But at the same time, we are masters of the reality of our souls, because we constantly tell stories about it and take it and pour it into a story, into the form of stories. And I look back at my life, and it's there's been more stories and more world of the imagination than a reality. We'll start with the church, Mormonism. It's the myths of Mormonism are just fantastic and beautiful and scary and from Joseph Smith talking to angels and the God coming down to him and say, I pick you to be the prophet of, there is no true church, Joseph. I pick you to found the true church. And he discovers a book on a gold plates, and he and then he really did build up this amazing church. One guy built it up, and then they killed him. The mob. And it's just these stories. These are fantastic stories. This is the story part of my life. Of course, I wasn't there when the mob killed Joseph Smith. I wasn't there in the Old West or whatever. But there it was. It's that story. Those stories, those myths, those legends, those images and structures and sayings and lessons and parables and fables, they were all part of me, of my soul, more than anything else. And then growing up in Hawaii, you're surrounded by ghost stories, the night marchers, that this parade of ghostly dead warriors, Hawaiian warriors, marching through the night into the water, down the sand, into the water, and into the depths of the ocean. I want to go with him. I want to see him, and I want to go with him. Of course, I don't want to go with him, actually, but it's just they're there. I know I will never forget these stories, and it just these ghost stories and the ocean at night of Hawaii. You stand on the beach and you look over the ocean, and the moon is glittering on it, and the stars are clear, and you hear the rhythm of the waves day and night. It never stops. It's just always thump, 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 thump. And it just invests your soul, that standing on the edge of the universe, the stars and the vastness of eternity above you, around you, a part of you, and you could feel it. You can almost feel it. And then these fantasy novels. My first great love was fantasy novels. It just, anything with a sword and a dragon, I'm in. I would, elves and, dwarves, and I'd go for it. And probably the best was the darkest was Conan, who was this dark barbarian from Hyperborea, the darkness of Chimeria, and he was just this dark anti-hero guy who had no rules, and he was always, killing the dragon, killing, the partner, taking the money, taking the treasure, taking the girl, getting what he wants, and I love that. That was just this story. I can still see him. I can see Conan. In my mind, he's there. In my heart, he's there. And then I tried to. One of the reasons I came to Germany after my mission, I returned to Germany to study, the Middle Ages. One of the reasons was fantasy. I wanted to see what the real fantasy was about. Lord of the Rings. It pretends to be kind of a medieval fantasy, and Conan, pretends to be the dark barbarian, the age of heroic poetry, But of course, the tales they told back then, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, in the cold wastelands of the north, or in the heartland of Europe, in the cold, drafty castles, those stories are not like the stories we tell in the world of fantasy today. The Conan and Tolkien, they told different stories. Those were different, or were they? And so I wanted to know. I wanted to go back to the originals, And so I studied, in Germany. I came back to Germany and studied in Munich medieval German literature, and I found the original Conan, and that was Siegfried the Dragon Slayer, and he is the hero of the written around 1200. You call it a heroic poem. It's in verse form, but it's really a novel. It's a political novel. And I was shocked at how political it was and how little heroic it was. The thing where he kills the dragon and then he puts on the magic cloak that makes him invisible, and he discovers the big treasure, and he battles with the dwarf and makes the dwarf guard the treasure, and all this stuff. These magical these things that for us today, or for me as a kid at least, and well, for us today too, is the core, the story of fantasy. The main thing about fantasy stories, the fight with the dragon. That's the big thing. That's a novel. That's an epic in itself, right there. In the Nibelungenlied, in which was the story of Siegfried. It's really 2 lines. It's seriously 2 lines. Some guy gets on the Siegfried appears at the ramparts, at the gate of the castle where this beautiful woman is. He's heard about and he wants to marry her. And even though he's never seen her before, I don't know how that works, but it's one of those difficult things. And so, and he appears, and then Hagen comes on the rampart and says, "Oh, that's Siegfried." And he killed the dragon. He had the magic thing, and he bathed in the dragon's blood, and his skin is hard as steel, and and he's super strong, and he has this magic cloak, and that's it. It really is a couple lines. It doesn't matter in the story. It matters that he has the skin of steel, right? But we don't see him battling the dragon. That is uninteresting to the writer who wrote the Nibelungenlied, the Song of the Nibelungs. It's based on heroic stories of, maybe another 1,000 years earlier, which were all lost to time. There was heroic poems about Siegfried the Dragon Slayer, and those probably, like Beowulf, spent a little more time with him and killing the dragon. But the actual Nibelungenlied is, first of all, Siegfried is not the hero. He dies in the middle. The hero is the woman he wants to marry, and finally marries, and then she falls in love with him, and then he gets killed, and he revenges her death. She is the actual, it's like a proto-feminist work of literature. She is the actual heroine of the story. It's amazing that at that time, they have this strong male character, but the writer did not care about him, really. He comes across even as a clown. And so this is Conan. And it was such a revelation to me when I found began to understand that in the Middle Ages they wrote stories that are much different than the way we write stories now. Of course, they have stories of heroism. They have, the Parsifal, the other really great top-notch, German poem or novel. It's a novel, actually, of the verse novel of the Middle Ages. Parsifal is all about a young boy, a young naive kid like Luke Skywalker, right? He goes out and he meets a man who gives him wisdom, like Yoda, and he has all kinds of adventures and all kinds of weird, strange world, and discovers a strange mystical world of things that go beyond just natural, normal life, and he discovers finally the Grail, this magical stone that has all this power, and he discovers the heart of man and how the heart of man must rule this stone, and that kind of thing. And so that's another one of those myths that I then studied. I studied them. It's not like you hear him as a boy and then you forget him. I didn't do that. I heard him as a boy, and then I heard another one as a young man, and then I studied them, and there are these, and one after the other, like a parade of myths, march into my mind and into my heart. And then there's the stories that I thought, that even the stories that I will never finish, the stories I will never write. That first novel I wrote, which I'd still like to rewrite, I still think back on it. I think back on the twist, the basic assumption of the novel is that it's a society that functions different from our society. We treasure courage over fear. That society treasured fear over courage. And so the crazy guy was the hero who was not afraid. He had courage, and he was nuts, and everyone hated him, It was a world where everyone was anti-hero, and the anti-hero of the world was actually a hero. We would define him as a hero. And I love doing that. And now whenever I, think of values that we have from, I don't know, trust and love and whatever, the virtues and the vices that we talk about, I go back to that story and I think, what if it were reversed? What if trust, we say, a relationship is based on trust. Well, what if we said, no, trust is the worst thing for a relationship. It's the worst thing. You should not have, do you have trust? Your counselor, your relationship counselor, would say, you have trust there should be no trust in this relationship. You got to get rid of that trust. The relationship should be based on money. And there's some truth to that, of course, because we all say relationships should be based on trust, but, half of all relationships immediately get divorced. So, yeah, it's just a theory like any other. But I could tell the story of my life, not in the reality, but just in the myths, just the stories. I could go back and just take one story after the other. And that would be bigger than the life I actually led. There's just more to it. There's more. The stories are more. The myths are more. And they're all reflections or extensions or attempts to explain or capture or harness this darkness deep inside of us. The sheer truth about death, about the dark that we deny for a little time that we're here in our lives. We pretend it's not there, but we will go back to it, into the non-existence. And that's the truth. That's the core of everything, is the non-existence. And so as we go through life, we try to look back into that, or we shy away from it, or both. And we invent these stories about it. About that vast universe out there with the stars, and you're standing on the shore of Hawaii and you're on the edge of the universe, and you have just a few years of light in this darkness before you return back to it, and you spend it trying to figure out what it is, this non-existence, this terrible darkness that you've come out of, that you were born out of, that you contradict every day you breathe, but will return to. And then I return to the frenzy of exultations. Look at this guy. This horse, the woman, this darkness, she is riding. She's riding it. She's conquering. She's harnessing it. And she's holding on for dear life. And, the thing I like most, beyond this, the mystery of it and the voluptuous, the sensuality, this is sexual. This chaos, riding the chaos. It's a sexual thing. It's not just, she's not wearing a suit of armor here. She's really communing in the horse in a sexual, sensual way. But again and again, the center of the picture, your eyes slowly drift up, past this leg and the buttocks. She's a little bit chubby for our taste now today, and these naked breasts and the hair waving all over the place, and this face, and she's kind of almost swooning. Her eyes seem to be closed. She's holding this horse's neck, her face, her head against the neck of this horse, and she's laughing. She's laughing. She's riding the chaos of our souls, and she's laughing. That's it, folks. And thanks for listening. Tune in again next week or tomorrow or whenever it is I do this again. Whatever, I don't know. If you're interested in the things that are really important to me, I write them in books and I put them on videos. Check out my books on Amazon.com or my YouTube channel or my Twitter and Facebook feeds, or subscribe to my newsletter. That's kind of a lot now that I say it like that. Or any of the above, whatever. I hope I can contribute something to your life or to someone's life, anyone's life really, in some way. I appreciate your support, and I wish you all the luck and success and happiness and fulfillment in your life. Take care till next time.